Hi, I'm Reverend Paula Skiles with Unity Church of San Marcos, Texas. This morning, I'd like to talk about how, we have just entered a brand new year, and this is a perfect time to explore what opportunities and things we may have never even imagined possible that might come to us that we could experience this year. Something greater than we may have ever experienced before. Now I realize that this is 2021 and we're still dealing with the coronavirus. That may seem like a real far-fetched idea. My message, Life is Like an Onion, is about looking at the layers of our life and what they surround. And it seems to me that as we consider how and what it's possible for us to have a different experience during this time, this is a perfect time. And as we've come up to what is normally observing Lent for many traditions in Christianity, I invite you to open to perhaps a different way. I know when I first began Unity, Lent for me was don't eat meat on Friday, or let go of, eating certain foods that weren't really good for me anyway. And I wasn't giving up so much. But once I began to study spiritual principles, I learned a different way. And it has made all the difference. And I invite you to be open as I share this message about how life is like an onion. Now, Steve Spritzer is a nationally recognized coordinator for diversity programs in this country. And he decided he wanted to try and cut through some of those layers of his life and the spiritual connection that he wanted so deeply, he knew was there. And so he decided to do something he called Rama Lent, which essentially was he made the decision that he would, for 40 days, as Lent is observed, he would follow the prescriptions of the Muslim tradition of not having anything to eat, drink, or any type of sexual activity from sunup to sundown for 40 days. Now that was pretty brutal on him, because he admits it was really hard, because the main thing he'd done was he'd forgotten to add that communitarian aspect where the people of the Muslim faith come together before sunrise and have this wonderful meal, and they pray with one another, and through the day they pray and encourage each other. And then, of course, that they get together at the end of the day, praying again, and having a meal and connecting. And that this is such an important part, and he recognized that that was something that he would like to recognize for. He needed to have that. But anyway, in his email he wrote, I did find myself having more time to pray and reflect once I got past the initial hunger and gained some control over the typical use of food in my life to quiet my fears or keep my belly full. I also came to realize my utter dependence on God's grace and seemed to seek God more in every aspect of my life. And finally, I came face to face with just how broken and vulnerable I was. It sounds like Steve managed to cut to the heart of it, and he experienced his own tears. He had an aha that I know made such a difference in his life and in his connecting. And I bet, though I don't know for a fact, I know that he probably let go of so many layers of unnecessary rules or prescriptions about how he had to live or how he had to do this or that had nothing to do with connecting to that Spirit of God. Now, I would wish that I could tell you I have all the answers. Just trust me, so to speak. Yeah, we've all heard the word trust me. Well, listen, I'm not saying that. I don't have all the answers. But what I can tell you is that you don't have to have all the answers to have peace of mind. And that one of the layers we are meant to build up in our life, it's like an onion experience, is trust. And a layer of trust is essential because in it we experience peace of mind. No, we don't have to have all the answers to our questions to have peace of mind. And that I can tell you. But trust is one of those spiritual principles you and I need to develop. It's that layer that comes over parts of our own being, that spiritual foundation. Like faith, another layer, or strength and courage, more layers. So those spiritual principles, when you and I love, all of those things build the type of layers that can carry you and I through life in such a different way. So anyway, I'm convinced that those seemingly colorful layers that many of us have surrounded our lives with as human beings, and I'm not saying you specifically, but just as human beings, such as bigotry or racism or some of the big ones, you know, we feel we're superior in some way, whatever it is. And those layers, those seemingly colorful layers, are the things that truly keep us from experiencing that sense of God's presence. And what I do believe is that as you and I build up those layers of spiritual principles and living out of those, what we're able to do is to resolve some of the issues that humankind faces. And I think that that is a huge vision. If you haven't had it before, maybe you can think about it. See if it's something you might feel called to be a part of. So, are you willing to develop that spiritual core at your being and help in some way? Here's a thought. Maybe you would like to fast. Now, Pope from the Catholic faith, Pope Francis, he had this thought about how to go about that. Fast from pessimism and be filled with hope. Fast from worries and trust God. Fast from complaints and contemplate blessings. Fast from pressures and be prayerful. Fast from bitterness and be compassionate to others. Fast from anger and be reconciled. These are the kinds of things that you and I can take to heart in what we will commit to. And I invite you and encourage you to maybe commit to some of those yourself. So what does all this have to do with Lent? Everything. My message is about taking one of Jesus's everyday experiences on his way to his last Passover. And he's just coming out of Jericho. And there's this, I want you to imagine with me, he's walking with all of his followers, and it's a beautiful sunny day, and the palm trees are around us, and we're walking on these dusty roads as they are. They're just what they are. And listening because he's talking. And all of a sudden you hear this racket and this commotion and a disturbance, and it gets louder and more vociferous and vehement. And you notice that on the side of the road there's a couple of outcast beggars. But they're not Jewish. You can tell they're not Jewish. And the crowd is, let me read it. You'll get what I'm talking about. This is, perhaps you'll recall this passage from Matthew 20:29 through 34. And as they left Jericho, a crowd followed. At the side of the road sat two blind men, and when they realized that Jesus was passing by, they cried out, "Have mercy on us, O Son of David." And the crowd rebuked them and sternly ordered them to be quiet. And instead the blind men cried all the louder. Jesus stood still. And then he asked them, "What will you have me do for you?" And they said, "Lord, open our eyes." Jesus had compassion on them, touched their eyes, and immediately they received their sight and followed him. Now this may sound like all the other healing passages that we've got in the Bible, and Jesus is doing some healing. But I want you to hear that this one is different. Remember, Jesus is going on Passover, and he's just, if we follow the timeline of the stories from the Bible, then what we know is that he has recently come off of the high mountain where he was transfigured. And is it at this point that many Christian faiths say that he became fully human and fully divine? But what would that really encompass? Does that mean that he knew everything and that he was beyond us and etc.? I don't think so. I think he truly accepted that he was the Son of God on such a deep level that his very cells of his being were changed. And he had a complete openness and a connection where he felt truly one with God. And I think that you and I, he said, "Follow thou me." I think that you and I are meant to do that as well. And that's my vision. We'll get back to vision in a bit. But anyway, so to me, this story hinges on two really important things. One is the denigration and the vehemence of the people that said Jesus was unworthy. You can't even talk to him. And the second one was the three words, Jesus stood still. Now, I've had some experiences in my life, and you have too, where you just kind of come to a situation and you just know something big is going on, or you just feel that something monumental is about to happen. And how do you normally react? I mean, like we get goosebumps, right? And we just need to stand still to try and absorb what is happening, what's going on. And I believe this is what was occurring when Jesus experienced hearing the crowd. Because something, I believe, that was integral to who he was as a prophet, as a child of God, and as a healer, and as a way shower, occurred in that moment. I think Jesus stood still because he was simply so overcome with an awareness, a knowing that he was about to do and experience something profound and so important. And I do believe it was a recognition that the mission that he had come for, the one he claimed, the kingdom of heaven on earth, that his whole purpose was not meant just for the Jewish people, but also for the Gentiles. And when they cried out to him, I think he knew on a deep core level that that was what it was meant to do when he asked them, "What would you have me do?" He recognized that he was meant to serve all people, not just the Jewish people that he had been born to. And so he broke through something within himself. You and I need to break through a lot of things within our being. It's not, people being shut up is not something that happened just in the past. Think about it. I mean, within the last year, just within the last year, there was an ophthalmologist in Wuhan who was sternly rebuked by his officials in his government when he tried to bring light to a SARS-like virus that he was noticing in his community. He was told by his officials through a letter that they came and they presented him with, that he then had to sign. He was told that he had to stop what he was doing, or he would be persecuted. They would make him suffer because he was upsetting the social order, right? That was the reason. And whether it's in China or whether it's here in the United States, shutting people up, we do it here too. Think about when the people in New York City who were part of the school system were they were almost forced, these officials, almost forced not to report to the city health department that teachers and staff were either dying of coronavirus or had been testing positive or any of those kinds of things. And they were urged to keep quiet, to avoid what was called mass hysteria. We have layers as human beings that we need to heal. Life is like an onion. And those layers of fear, the layers of not being able to see what's right and to do that, and layers of greed and layers of also so many different layers, those things tend to cover us up. And even those times that we don't even listen to some of those, we'll hear those inner voices. Shame, procrastination. You know what I'm talking about. The ones that keep us from living something possible, more of life. So, this morning I invite us to see how this statement, Jesus stood still, might affect us. Maybe in your life, in this moment, you might stand still and look with all the people around, because we're still standing on those dusty streets of Jericho, outside the city. And we've just listened to these people, and we can see the spiritual emptiness, the racism, the different things that we're a part of and are still a part of humankind that you and I need to address. You and I are part of healing. So visioning, yeah, that's essential. And I think it's essential because, well, think this way. Stephen Covey, in his book, First Things First, writes about Viktor Frankl. He was an Austrian psychologist who made a startling discovery when he and others survived the horrible conditions of the camps, the Holocaust camps. And the single most important factor that Viktor Frankl came to was a sense of future vision, a compelling vision of something that they needed to do was one of the key reasons that he and others survived. The same thing for Vietnam prisoners of war and other prisoners of war, that they survived has been attributed to a sense of this vision. So you and I, our life, if you will, possibilities of greater good, they hinge upon vision and taking action. Yeah. And sometimes that taking action will bring tears to our eyes. But Jesus understood the power of vision coupled with an intention as he was sharing his message of heaven on earth. And he got this laser-like focus, and he recognized that the power of God flowed in and through him And it went beyond all circumstances, beyond seeing the people who were blind, beyond seeing the physical realities of leprosy or death or anything else. And that's something that I see as a possibility for humankind, is that there are so many of us living, expressing, and following in those same footsteps, where we are one with that presence. We are one and know it, and we are literally transfigured. I encourage you to let go of anything that is rebuking and trying to silence those things that come to you that are yours, a greater good, or that will help you to experience more of that Christ Spirit within you. So as you and I live, move, and have our being from that vision of letting ourselves know that God is more than capable of making something happen, and remembering that you and I are connected. And that core, what is that core? Because you and I are spiritual beings before we were ever and are physical beings. Within our core is that spiritual reality of ourselves. And I think as you and I can develop and hold on to a recognition of how to live it, I think we can hold on to a greater vision, the vision of more and more people living as Christ. Jesus wanted us not to worship him, but to follow him. He said, these things and greater you can do. He had a vision for us, and he holds it, and he continues to hold it today. And I invite you to walk with him and me as we go forward in this year into a new realm of possibilities, ones we may never have even considered. Jesus stood still. And I invite you to do the same as we cut through the layers, that even though they may bring tears to our eyes, as we cut through the layers and shed them of those things that don't serve us, to experience that goodness and that wonder and the joy and the beauty that we can and want in life. Peace. Be still and know the presence of God. So I close my message with a prayer, and I hope you will close your eyes if it feels comfortable and allow my prayer to fulfill and expand our sense of heart this morning. It has to do with a sense of epiphanies, which is what I feel that Jesus had, remember? That epiphany when he stood still. So I invite you. Precious Spirit, we open our eyes and our hearts, our minds, to a greater good, to all that is very possible. And we honor that which is greater good that shines within our souls. As we move through this year, sharing our gifts of love, peace, joy, and wisdom with the world. May our light shine before others. And may we know you, precious Spirit, as heaven on earth within us and around